Leave. Ethan's voice was cold. He stood in the middle of our fancy entryway, swirling whiskey in a crystal glass like he had all the time in the world. Your stuff is already packed. I looked at the suitcases lined up by the door, the same expensive luggage he bought me last Christmas when things still felt perfect. My hands shook, but I refused to let my voice do the same. So, that's it? After 8 years of marriage, you're just throwing me out? He smirked and took another sip. Let's not make this dramatic, Mia. We both know this marriage has run its course. Your money helped build Novatech into what it is today. Now that we're going public, I need someone who fits the company's future, someone who understands the industry. My name is Mia Carter, and at 34, I was watching my world fall apart. 8 years ago, I married Ethan because I believed in him. He was smart but struggling, working on a tech startup he swore would change everything. When my parents died in a car accident 2 years later, they left me a fortune. $3 million in savings and shares from my family's business. I didn't even hesitate, I gave it all to Ethan's dream. You mean someone like Sophie? I asked. Sophie, the 25-year-old head of marketing, had been around a lot lately. Too much. The way she looked at Ethan during meetings. The whispered conversations. The late nights at our house. Ethan's smile grew wider. Sophie understands the vision. She knows what it takes to build something groundbreaking. He waved his glass at me like I was an old piece of furniture. You were great in the beginning. The supportive wife. The investor. But Novatech is worth $100 million now. This is a whole new level. I glanced around the house, the grand staircase, the chandelier that cost more than a car, the art I carefully picked to make this place feel like home. All of it paid for with my family's money. My trust. My love. The board meets tomorrow to finalize the IPO, Ethan added, glancing at his expensive watch, a gift from me. Sophie and I need to prepare, so if we could wrap this up. I walked toward my suitcases, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Every step carried years of memories, hosting dinners to help Ethan network, staying up late listening to his ideas, canceling vacations so he could work. I had believed in him. I had given him everything. You know what's funny? I asked, turning to face him. You think you've won? That you played this perfectly. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Haven't I? Novatech is about to go public. I'm going to be one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country. And you, he shrugged, well, you'll get whatever the prenup allows. Which, if I remember correctly, isn't much. I smiled. He had no idea. The quiet steps I had taken over the last year. The careful moves I had made as I watched him grow more distant. More arrogant. Good luck with the IPO, Ethan, I said, grabbing my bags. I'm sure it'll be interesting. His smirk wavered for just a second. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see. I walked out without looking back, the heavy door slamming shut behind me. Ethan thought I was just another clueless wife. But he had underestimated me. The money he used to build Novatech? I had records for every cent, signed, dated, and safely stored with my lawyer. The early contracts? All preserved, proving I was more than just an investor. The long nights he claimed to be working? I had proof of something else entirely. But my real ace? Something that would make tomorrow's board meeting unforgettable. I checked into a luxury hotel, just a small treat I had planned in advance. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed. A message from my best friend, Olivia. Olivia, are you okay? Did it happen? Me, it's done. He kicked me out, just like we expected. Sophie's probably moving in as we speak. That smug bastard. He has no idea what's coming, does he? Olivia's text popped up on my screen. I smiled, thinking about the files safely stored on my laptop, the files that would turn Ethan's perfect plan upside down. No, I replied, he doesn't. That night, I sat in my hotel room, looking out at the city lights. 6 years ago, Ethan was just a struggling entrepreneur with big dreams. I believed in those dreams. I wanted to help him build something important. When my parents passed away and left me $3 million, I thought it was fate, a way to honor them by helping create something great. I still remember the day I transferred the money to Novateka's account. Ethan hugged me tight, whispering, "We're going to build an empire together, you and me, Mia, partners in everything." Now, here I was, kicked out of my own home so he could move in his girlfriend, tossed aside like I never mattered. But Ethan made one big mistake. He underestimated me. Growing up, I watched my father run his business. He always said trust was good, but documents were better. My phone buzzed again, an email from my lawyer, Vanessa. "Vanessa, everything's ready for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we start, there's no turning back." I thought about Ethan's smug smile, about all the nights I sat home alone while he was working late with Sophie, about how he thought he could use me, take my money, and throw me away. "I'm sure," I typed back. "Let's show them what I'm really worth." The next morning, as I walked into Novateka's sleek headquarters, the security guard, Tom, did a double take. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Reynolds said you wouldn't be coming in anymore." I smiled and slid my still active ID across the desk. He was wrong about a lot of things, Tom. The elevator ride to the top floor felt surreal. I had spent years coming here, bringing Ethan dinner when he worked late, attending company events, helping build relationships, the expensive furniture, the modern artwork, the elegant conference rooms, all of it paid for with my family's money. As I reached the boardroom, I could hear Ethan's voice, confident, charming, the same way he always was when convincing people to believe in him. "Which is why this IPO will make Novatek the leader in cloud security, our proprietary technology." I pushed the door open. Silence. 12 board members turned to look at me, their expressions shifting from surprise to discomfort. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his presentation frozen on the screen. Beside him, Sophie's flawless face turned pale. "Mia," Ethan recovered quickly, forcing a tight smile, "this is a private board meeting, you shouldn't be here." I calmly walked to the far end of the table and set my laptop down. "Actually, I have every right to be here. As a major stakeholder in Novatek, I think the board should hear what I have to say before voting on the IPO." One of the older board members, Richard, frowned. "Ms. Carter, we were under the impression that you had no official role in the company." "It's Ms. Carter," I corrected him, "and that impression is wrong. In fact, there's a lot about Novatek that needs clearing up." Ethan's confident expression cracked, just slightly. "Mia, don't do this, whatever you think you have." I connected my laptop to the screen. Gasps filled the room. Displayed for everyone to see was the original investment agreement, a $3 million transfer from my personal account to start Novatek, clearly outlined terms about my role as a founding investor. "As you can see," I said smoothly, "my investment wasn't just a wife supporting her husband, it was a business deal, with legal agreements about my involvement, especially in major decisions like an IPO." Several board members exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan had always acted like Novatek was his creation. He never mentioned that my inheritance had built the foundation of the company. "That was years ago," Ethan said, forcing a laugh. "The company has grown way beyond that early investment." "True," I nodded, clicking to the next slide, "which is why I found it very interesting that you've been erasing my contributions from company records." I split the screen. On one side, the original documents, on the other, the altered versions Ethan had submitted for the IPO filing. Murmurs spread across the room. Tampering with IPO documents was serious, the kind of thing that could stop the entire process and trigger investigations. "This is ridiculous," Sophie cut in, gripping Ethan's arm. "You're just bitter because my husband used my family's money to build this company, then tried to cut me out," I finished, smiling. Sophie fell silent. Ethan's face turned pale. Game on. When Ethan thought he didn't need me anymore, I interrupted. "No, Sophie, I'm not bitter, I'm just well prepared." I clicked to the next slide, and Ethan's face drained of color. There, on the screen, were bank statements showing millions of dollars moved from Novateka's accounts to offshore holdings over the past year. "Would anyone like to explain these transactions?" I asked innocently, because I'm very curious about why company funds were being moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands right before the IPO announcement. Richard, the board member who had spoken earlier, stood up quickly. "Mr. Reynolds, is this accurate?" Ethan tugged at his collar, his calm facade cracking. These are complex financial arrangements for tax purposes, completely standard. Standard? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you told Sophie when you promised her shares from these accounts? When you planned to cash out together after the IPO? Sophie jumped up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. How did you? No, I finished for her. Let's just say you should be more careful about what you discuss over company email, especially when the company's security system was partly funded by the person you were planning to betray. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Several members were already on their phones, probably calling their lawyers. Others were demanding explanations from Ethan, who stood there, looking like his perfect world was crumbling around him. I raised my voice above the noise. This is a simple choice. Either we postpone the IPO and restructure the company leadership to reflect its true ownership, or I take this evidence to the SEC. Your call. Ethan stormed around the table toward me, his face twisted in anger. You manipulative, he hissed, barely holding it together. You're trying to destroy everything I built. No, Ethan, I said calmly, meeting his eyes. I'm taking back what's mine, what we built together, before you decided to throw me away. The board quickly called for an emergency recess. As people filed out, some of them already dialing crisis managers and lawyers, I packed up my laptop. Everything I had shown them was just the beginning. I had more, proof of Ethan's lies and deception, ready to go if needed. Richard, the senior board member, approached me as I stood up. Ms. Carter, I think we need to have a longer conversation about your role in Novatech, perhaps over lunch? I smiled, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I'd like that. I have quite a few ideas about the company's future. As I left the room, I caught a glimpse of Ethan and Sophie in a heated discussion, their perfect plan falling apart. Ethan looked up as I walked past, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. This was just the beginning. Ethan thought he could discard me without consequences. But he was about to learn just how expensive that mistake would be. The fallout. The weeks after the board meeting were a whirlwind of legal negotiations, emergency board sessions, and company restructuring. I watched it all from my temporary office on the 19th floor, not quite the penthouse where Ethan still sat, but close enough to keep an eye on things. The IPO had been postponed indefinitely. After my revelations, the board wasn't taking any chances. They hired independent auditors to go through every transaction, every document, every decision made in the past 6 years. What they found made my evidence seem tame by comparison. They've uncovered at least 12 million in questionable transactions. Sandra, my lawyer, told me one morning as we reviewed the latest findings. Ethan wasn't just planning to cash out with Sophie, he was setting up a parallel company structure. He was going to use the IPO money to start fresh, leaving Novatech as an empty shell. I sipped my coffee, looking out over the city skyline. And Sophie? Any word from her legal team? Sandra smirked. She's singing like a bird, turned over everything, emails, texts, recorded conversations. Apparently, she's not as loyal to Ethan now that his perfect plan has fallen apart. I wasn't surprised. Sophie had always been ambitious, but her loyalty only went as far as her own interests. Once she realized Ethan couldn't deliver the wealthy future he promised, she quickly jumped ship. The press had been all over the story. Tech CEO's IPO dreams crumble amid fraud allegations. One headline read, Novatech founder's wife exposes multi-million-dollar deception, screamed another. Ethan's once golden reputation in the tech world was now tarnished. But I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted justice. The board had been surprisingly open to my proposals for restructuring the company. With Ethan's credibility destroyed and the SEC investigation hanging over his head, they were eager to find a stable way forward. The board meeting's in an hour, Sandra reminded me as she gathered her papers. Are you ready? I nodded, straightening my blazer. More than ready. The final blow. The boardroom felt different now. Same sleek table, same floor-to-ceiling windows, but the energy had shifted. Ethan sat at the far end, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained fury. His lawyer whispered something in his ear as I took my seat. Richard called the meeting to order. As you all know, we're here to finalize the leadership restructuring of Novatech. Following the independent audit and extensive legal review, the board has prepared a resolution. I kept my expression neutral as Richard read through the terms. Ethan would step down as CEO. He would retain a minority stake in the company, but his offshore accounts would be frozen and investigated. And most importantly, I would be installed as executive chairperson, with final say over all major company decisions. Ethan jumped to his feet. "This is insane," he shouted. "You're giving her control of my company." "Ours," I corrected quietly, "built with my family's money, my support, and my trust. Money you tried to steal, support you abused, and trust you betrayed." The board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up for Ethan. They had all seen the evidence. They had all realized how close they were to being implicated in his schemes. "The resolution is fair," Richard said firmly. "Ms. Carter's investment and early involvement were instrumental in building Novatech. Her recent actions protected not just her interests, but those of every shareholder and employee." The vote was quick. 10 in favor. 2 abstaining. None opposed. Just like that, control of Novatech passed to me. As people filed out of the room, Ethan approached, his face dark with fury. "Congratulations," he spat. "You've destroyed everything I worked for." I stood slowly, gathering my things. "No, Ethan, I saved what we built together. You're the one who tried to destroy it, with greed and lies." His sneer returned. "You think you can run this company? You don't know the first thing about tech." I smiled. "I know about loyalty, about building trust, and keeping it. The technology might be complex, but the principles of good business are simple, something my father taught me long ago." I walked to the door, then turned back for one last look at the man I had once loved so completely. He had underestimated me. Never again,